My name is Casey Bennett. I'm 36. And the morning my sister called to tell me our dad was dead, he was sitting 3 feet away, stealing bacon right off my plate. 6:30 in the morning, Tucson time. I put the call on speaker. Casey, Dad died last night, Renee said, cold as a repo notice. He left everything to me and Trent. You get nothing. Behind her, my brother-in-law laughed. Finally, you're out. Dad set his coffee down without a sound, leaned toward that phone, and said something I'm not repeating yet. Renee didn't get to hear it that morning. You'll hear it exactly where she finally did. Here's what nobody on that call knew. The funeral they were already carving up an inheritance over was happening that Sunday. And Dad had picked the flowers himself. Lilies. My mom couldn't stand lilies. He said she wouldn't mind missing this one. Welcome to silent revenge, where quiet people finally get loud, with dignity. Comment where you're watching from, because what my dad did to get his name back deserves witnesses. 8 months earlier, my biggest worry was a shift schedule. I'm a travel physical therapist, 13-week contracts, hospital to hospital. How a girl from a 2-stoplight Kentucky town pays off grad school loans before 40. Dad thought that was hilarious. You drive 3 states to teach strangers how to walk again, and I can't get you to clean a gutter. That was Frank Callahan, 76, Army 1968 to 1972, who opened Callahan Custom Woodworks in 1984, cabinets and staircases for half the county 34 years, before selling the shop in 2018. He wasn't rich. He was paid off rich, same house on Willow Creek Lane since '85, paid off by 2011. The kind of quiet wealth that never shows on a man's boots, but shows up later in a courthouse. My mom, Ruth, died in 2022, and Dad grieved the way he built furniture, quietly without asking anybody to watch. Every Saturday he wound her little brass mantel clock, because Ruth always said a stopped clock made a house feel dead. We were fine. Then one October afternoon, my 76-year-old father climbed a ladder to clear his own gutters, because asking for help was never his favorite pastime. He fell 8 feet. Broken right wrist, surgical 6 to 8 weeks healing, and inconvenience with hardware. I flew in from a Sedona contract within 48 hours. My sister Renee was already at the hospital with flowers, tears arranged as carefully as the bouquet. Her husband Trent was pumping the surgeon's hand like he'd just closed a sale. Trent sells retirement annuities, smooth voice, a practiced handshake. You get on back to your patients, Casey, he told me. Family takes care of family. Sounded like kindness. Took months to hear what it actually was, a man quietly pocketing the keys. I asked to see Dad's discharge plan. Trent said it was all handled, filed at the house. Renee said, "We've got this, sweetie." Dad gave me a loopy thumbs up. Go on, kiddo. I'm surrounded by professionals. So I flew back to Arizona. Hear me clearly, because it matters later. I didn't leave because I didn't care. I left because the 2 people closest to him swore everything was handled, and one of them had already decided exactly how handled it was about to get. Dad moved into Renee and Trent's place that November, 15 minutes from his own door. Just a few weeks, they said. Here's where the first document appeared, the honest one. Cast on his right hand, he couldn't sign checks, so Trent brought a notary and Dad signed a limited power of attorney, bills only, with his clumsy left hand. Legal, reasonable, boring, your own dad would have signed one. That's exactly what makes this work. Never starts as a crime. Starts as a favor. Renee posted a photo that week. Dad at her table, soup in front of him, captioned, "Blessed to care for my daddy." 200 likes. Meanwhile, Trent, on a Sunday call, referred to the Willow Creek house as the asset. Dropped it casual like weather talk. Dad noticed too, he told me later. Trent brought the POA papers to his bedside instead of the kitchen table, pen already uncapped. But his wrist ached, the pain meds made everything feel like tomorrow's problem, and the paper said bills only. He signed. It was the last document they ever showed him before asking for ink. Then the wall went up, one polite brick at a time. My Sunday calls started landing on Renee. He's napping, hon. 3 weeks straight, I didn't hear Dad's actual voice. His flip phone broke, so I bought a smartphone and shipped it. It went missing. I shipped a second, tracked, delivered, said the email. Dad didn't want it, Renee said. You know how he is with technology. My father built custom staircases with a laser level at 76. He is not afraid of a phone. Every time I ask to talk to him directly, the same soft wall. He's resting. We've got it. Why are you being like this? Here's what nobody warns you about. When a competent man's caregivers swear he's fine, a daughter 2 states away has no lever to pull. I was locked into a contract with loans breathing down my neck, and the only 2 witnesses inside that house kept smiling straight through it. Renee ended one call with a line I've never forgotten. You chose your career, Casey. Let the people who actually stayed handle it. I flew home for Christmas anyway, and at that table Dad's chair had been moved into the corner. He'd just turned 77. The cast was off, but something else had been fitted onto him, a kind of smallness. Thinner. Quieter. Decaf coffee, doctor's orders, though no doctor had ever said that. On the back porch, he told me his checkbook had been put on a diet. Statements used to come to Willow Creek. Now everything was paperless, and the passwords lived with Trent, who'd twice deflected his questions with, "That's what you've got me for." I asked Renee calmly if we could sit down after the holidays and go through Dad's finances together. Trent materialized like he'd been summoned. Family doesn't need lawyers, Casey. Unless you're accusing somebody. I asked about bank statements. He introduced the word lawyers. Renee cried right on cue about everything she does. And Dad, because decent men make the softest hostages, patted my arm. I'm fine, kiddo. Don't start a war at Christmas. By February, the Sunday calls had gone from real conversation to a rehearsed script, and I'd had enough. I took 4 days off, told nobody, flew home. Renee opened the door surprised, then recovered fast. Oh, you just missed him. Overnight fishing trip with the VFW guys. Fishing. In Kentucky. In February. I drove to Willow Creek and stood in the yard, grass shaggy under frost, mailbox stuffed, curtains shut. On the way out, I ran into Walt Higgins, Dad's oldest friend, ran the local funeral home for 4 decades. Frank hasn't been to a post meeting in 3 months, hon, Walt said. We figured he'd moved in with you. Not fishing. Not at meetings at all. I called Renee from the gas station. She didn't even pause. That's not the VFW crowd, it's his other buddies, you don't know them. A lie stacked on a lie like cordwood. 3 days later, she texted me a photo, Dad in an armchair, smiling thin. Dad's doing great. Stop checking up on us. There was a detail in the background I wouldn't understand for another 5 months. When I finally did, it changed how I saw every photo she'd ever sent me. If this is hitting close to home, hit subscribe right now because it gets worse before it gets so much better. My contract ended in early May, and I came home with a plan forming, drive to Kentucky unannounced, refuse to leave without seeing my father. The phone rang before I'd unpacked. Dana Pruitt, a fellow travel PT I'd worked with years back, had taken a job at a facility called Pinebrook Manor near the Tennessee line. Her voice was careful. Casey, we've got a resident came in back in March. Every staffer on every shift if they know a PT named Casey. Says she's his daughter. I couldn't speak. His name's Frank Callahan, hon, that your dad? Nobody had ever said nursing home to me. Not once. As far as I'd been told, my father was 15 minutes from his own door. Dana said one more thing before I hung up, and it's the thing that put me in the car. He doesn't present like a placement, Casey. He presents like somebody misplaced him. I didn't call Renee. I didn't call Trent. I got in the car. Ask your own parents today, kindly over coffee, who holds your power of attorney and have you seen your own bank statement this month? It's the one question I didn't ask in time, and it cost my father everything but his life. 2 hours of highway, and I spent every mile being a clinician because being a daughter would have put me in a ditch. Pinebrook Manor sat back off a county road, a sign with 2 letters burned out. Cheap disinfectant over something older, a call light blinking with nobody moving toward it, 1 aide for a wing that needed 4. My father had been living there 10 weeks while my sister posted about family being everything. He was in a shared room, second bed, a window that didn't open. The man who once carried a full sheet of plywood up a staircase alone out of pure stubbornness was maybe 15 pounds lighter, gray stubble, a shirt I didn't recognize hanging on him like a borrowed apology. But his eyes came up, and they were still his eyes. Sharp. Present. "Took you long enough, kiddo," he said. "They told me you knew. They told me you signed off on all of it. They hadn't just hidden him from me. They'd hidden me from him, told each of us the other one had agreed to it. We untangled 7 months of lying, and every knot had the same fingerprints. His flip phone hadn't broken. Renee took it to protect him from scam calls. My smartphones and my 4 letters never reached him. Back in March, Trent told him they needed him out just 2 weeks for guest room repairs. 2 weeks came and went, Trent's answers got shorter, and then one day the answer was a hallway at Pinebrook. Through it all they told him I knew that I was too busy to be bothered. He'd kept a torn envelope with my old number penciled on it, the one number they couldn't cancel. But the hall phone required staff to dial out, and staff at Pinebrook were basically a rumor. I asked him the date, the president, had him count backward from 100 by 7s just to watch him roll his eyes. "It's Tuesday. I'm in purgatory. And your quiz is easier than one of Trent's sales pitches." Sharp as ever. Nothing wrong with my father's mind, and that fact was about to matter enormously. Then he lowered his voice. "Kiddo, whatever paper they used to put me in here, I never signed a second one. I walked to the front office with my license number ready." The administrator recited the script he'd been handed. Only the responsible party, Trent POA, could authorize a transfer. I asked one question. "Does Mr. Callahan have a diagnosis of cognitive impairment on file? Dementia, incapacity, anything?" Silence while he clicked through the chart. None existed. A competent adult is not a package in storage. He can discharge himself. "Or we can call the ombudsman together and go through the intake file page by page," I said. "Paperwork appears fast once you offer to read it with a state official on the line." 20 minutes later, my father signed his own discharge. "First thing I've signed in 6 months," he said, "and it's a jailbreak." Dana hugged him at the door and slipped him cookies like contraband. The facility would notify the POA by certified mail. "Fine," I said. Mail takes days. On the drive home, Dad watched the fields peel by. "They think I'm filed away, kiddo. Let's not correct them just yet." I set him up in my apartment. Then we walked into a bank branch because Frank Callahan was still the account holder of record. 11 pages. He read it the way he used to read bad blueprints, slow, twice through, no cursing. In 5 months, $189,000 had left his accounts. 44,000 labeled care expenses for a man eating instant potatoes at Pinebrook. 91,000 wired to something called TH Ventures LLC. Take a guess whose initials those are. 51,000 toward a lake house Trent and Renee bought in 2021, top of the market. 22,000 remained. Stapled behind it, a courtesy copy of something worse. A home equity application on Willow Creek, $155,000 pending, signed Frank Callahan on April 9th. On April 9th, my father was 110 miles away, asking nurses if anybody knew his daughter. I called Renee that night. One call, one chance. "Tell me your side." "I'm listening." What she said told me everything about where her heart had gone. "You were never really part of this family, Casey. Don't you dare lecture the one who stayed." So we hired somebody whose entire job is paperwork. Diane Whitcomb, elder law, 62, a handshake like a filing cabinet closing. "Documents don't lie, Mr. Callahan," she said. "That's why I trust them more than people." She moved fast, a notarized revocation of every power of attorney, a signature dispute letter that froze the helic before a dime moved, a report to Adult Protective Services, and a fraud affidavit that started legal clocks a smooth talker can't slow down. Then she laid out the problem. Civil recovery, I can get you. Criminal intent is harder. He'll say your father authorized everything verbally. And buried in the bank's file was the thing we hadn't had before. A second power of attorney, full financial authority, notarized in January, the one Dad never signed. For criminal charges, Diane said, it helps if they use a forged document again. Somewhere public. Somewhere witnessed. Fraud in a drawer is a lawsuit. Fraud performed for an audience is a conviction. Dad studied that page a long, quiet minute, a signature that wasn't his sitting on top of his own name. Then he asked me to bring him his old Army discharge papers. We drove out to Willow Creek on a Tuesday while Trent sold somebody 30 years of promises. My key still fit the back door. Inside, the file drawers hung open, already picked through, my mom's jewelry box empty on the guest bed. On the mantel, her brass clock had stopped dead. Nobody had wound it in 7 months. The house doesn't even smell like mine anymore, Dad said. He knelt and pulled his old Army footlocker from under the bed, still locked, the one thing Trent's crew hadn't cracked because to a man like Trent an old soldier's box is just furniture. Inside, squared away like 1972, his DD-214, the original deed, his medals wrapped in a handkerchief and an envelope soft with handling marked in my mom's round hand, for Frank when I can't say it myself. He didn't open that one there. He carried the footlocker to the kitchen table and laid the forged power of attorney beside his real discharge papers. Then he went very quiet, and I've learned to pay attention when quiet men get quieter. 2 signatures, 52 years apart. On the DD-214, the F leaning hard left, ink pressed deep. I sign like I mean it, he said. On the second page, round, even, polite. Every letter behaving prettier than I ever wrote. But the handwriting wasn't the knife. The date was. His hardware check sedation ran 9 to 11:30 that January morning, staff initialed at every step. The notary stamp claimed the POA was signed at 10:15, 20 miles away. A man cannot be sedated in one town and signing in another. The paper hadn't just lied. It had told on itself. Something in Dad's face settled, grief clocking out, a decision clocking in. Dead men don't sign papers, he said. Their notary friends stamped a ghost, kiddo. So let's introduce them to a real one. Hit subscribe before I tell you what he decided to do next, because you have never heard a plan quite like this one. The certified letter from Pinebrook landed at the Hargroves that Friday, and my phone detonated by noon. Trent, voicemail 1, all the syrup gone. You've removed an at-risk senior without authorization. That's kidnapping, Casey. A finance guy quoting criminal law is a dog quoting the mailman. Voicemail 3 threatened an emergency guardianship. Dad was confused, manipulated by a daughter after his money. Cues the other side of the exact crime in your own pocket. Diane stayed calm. Guardianship requires an independent evaluation. Your dad will pass it like a road test. But a contested guardianship takes weeks, gets loud, buys time. Time for a frozen helic to thaw if the dispute got messy. Men like Trent don't fight to win. They fight to keep the clock running while the money finds the exits. That's when Dad called an old Army buddy, Sal Rourke, 79, a retired county detective who still reads a room like a crime scene out of habit. Sal listened at my kitchen table, never touched his coffee, and said the sentence that changed everything. Frank, you sue these two, you win quiet 2 years from now, and nobody in this county ever learns what they did to you. You want your money back, or you want your name back? Dad wanted his name back. That night Renee texted, no greeting, Dad will choose us. He always needs the ones who stay. You've got a career and an empty apartment. I read it out loud because we'd agreed, no more secrets managed on his behalf. He looked at it, then out the window. She thinks staying close to a man is the same as standing by him. He handed the phone back. Call Walt. Tell him I finally need that favor he's owed me since 74. He laid the plan out at 9 that night over decaf he poured as a joke. They need me incapacitated or dead to finish this, he said. Guardianship's their slow play. Let's give them the other option. Better catering. I laughed, then saw his eyes and stopped because he meant it. Let them believe he died. Not a fake death certificate, not a false report to any agency, not one obituary printed anywhere. He'd already drawn the lines and refused to cross them. Just one phone call, friend to family, and a memorial his army buddies threw the way they've done for 60 years. Lying to liars isn't a felony, kiddo. Sal checked twice. Greed is a reflex. Tell Trent and Renee the man is gone and they won't pause to grieve. They'll produce that forged will in front of God and everybody because they can't afford probate questions later. And using a forged document out loud in public in front of witnesses carries a name that comes with handcuffs. Walt listened on his porch, coffee going cold. 5 seconds of silence, for Walt, a filibuster. I've buried 4 mayors and 1 man I genuinely didn't care for. This'll be my first dress rehearsal. One call only personal to Renee. Her dad had collapsed and he was gone. Every word deniable. Dana's part was cleaner still. If anybody phoned asking after Frank Callahan, she'd confirm only what was technically true. Mr. Callahan is no longer with us here. The VFW would host a memorial that Sunday, and Diane would attend as a guest, briefcase in hand. Walt asked one last question. What flowers? Lilies, Dad said. Ruth hated lilies. She won't mind missing this one. I know some of you are yelling at your screen. Just sue them, Casey. We'd probably have one in 2 years quietly in some beige hallway. But my father didn't just want his money back. He wanted his whole town to see exactly who these people were in real time. Stay with me, the funeral's coming and you want a front row seat. Subscribe now so you don't miss how this ends. Thursday, 7 in the evening. Walt made the call from his porch, Dad and I on speaker, my father attending the announcement of his own death with his arms crossed. Renee, honey, it's Walt Higgins. It's about your dad. He collapsed this evening. He's gone. 3 full seconds of pause. Then my sister's first question, breathed out over what I'd swear was relief. Where was he staying? Was anything with him? Papers. Dad's face didn't move. His hand did, knuckles tightening once, then easing. Renee said thank you in a voice already doing math. She never once asked to see her father. 23 minutes later, phone records showed Trent calling the Hellick lender's office, asking about disbursement timelines. Grief apparently keeps business hours. Which brings us back to Friday, 6:30, bacon in the pan, Dad across the table stealing it. Renee's call. You know the words now, but hear them again, knowing what I knew. Casey, Dad died last night. He left everything to me and Trent. You get nothing. And Trent close to the phone. Finally, you're out. She wasn't notifying me of a death. She was serving an eviction from the family, the estate, the whole story. Claim always comes first with people like that. Dad leaned toward that phone, close enough for the steam off his coffee to fog the screen, and said something quiet, level, final. You haven't heard it yet because Renee didn't. My thumb was on the mute button, had been since I answered. What he said was for Sunday. She'd hear it standing up in front of everybody. And so will you. They gave us Saturday and spent it exactly like themselves. By 9, Renee had posted a black and white photo. Rest easy, Daddy. Your girl was with you till the end. 200 reactions by lunch. That's where I finally understood the February photo. Same armchair, same wall, same clock reading 4:07 in both. Same shirt on my dad in both. Every proof of life she'd ever sent had come from one staged afternoon, rationed out for months like leftovers. He'd been gone from that house since March, and her photographs never got the memo. While she posted, Trent worked. Dad's neighbor, Simmons, called me confused. A van in the driveway, a man drilling out the locks. Before any funeral, changing the locks on a dead man's house. Diane added the timestamp to a folder that was getting thick. Dana reported someone had called Pinebrook asking for records for the estate. The body wasn't even cold. Mostly because it was at my kitchen table finishing a BLT. Sunday came. 60 folding chairs. One closed casket. My sister walked in wearing brand new shoes, carrying a folder. Flags up front, the honor board, 60 chairs on an old wood floor that creaks confessions out of everybody. A casket up front closed, nobody questions a closed casket. Lilies everywhere. The whole town came. Dad and I waited in the storage room behind the stage, sightline through the hinge gap. My hands were cold. His weren't. Renee entered like a widow from a magazine. Trent worked the room, folder tucked under one arm. They took the front row. 2:00, Walt cleared his throat. Before we share memories of Frank, the family has asked to say a few words about his affairs. They'd requested it themselves that morning. Lambs volunteering for the spit. Trent took the podium like it had been holding his place. Frank was family, and family honors a man's wishes. He opened the folder. Frank had a will drawn up this past April. He leaves his home, his accounts, his truck, everything to Renee and me. Signed April 20th. 60 chairs shifted at once because everybody in that hall had heard Frank Callahan brag about his PT kid for 30 years, and the arithmetic didn't add up. Trent should have stopped there. He never stops there. He raised a hand for quiet, found my face at the back wall. And to my daughter, Casey, I leave nothing. For reasons she knows. He read a dead man's cruelty to a room full of that dead man's oldest friends and smiled while he did it. In the corner, Diane's thumbs undid her briefcase clasps. Walt leaned toward the mic, gentle as church. April 20th, you said. Strange date for a signature. The side door clicked. My father walked into his own memorial service. Dark suit pressed to a knife's edge, VFW pin catching the light. He didn't hurry. Frank Callahan has never hurried for anybody, and he wasn't about to start at his own funeral. The old floor announced each step like a drum roll it had saved up for 60 years. The room came apart in slow motion. Casserole dish hit the floor and nobody looked. Church lady crossed herself twice. Dana barked one laugh before clamping both hands over her mouth. Dot said loud, well, I'll be. Renee didn't scream, she just stopped operating, white as the lilies, mascara heading south. Trent froze at the podium, the forged will still raised at shoulder height, in full view of 60 witnesses and one lawyer. Dad reached the podium, adjusted the mic down with 2 fingers the way he used to true up a hinge. Nice box, Walt. Little roomy for my taste. Then, mild as morning, dead men don't sign papers, son. And they surely don't drink coffee. Trent sold louder, the way cornered men do. This is a sick joke, he's not competent, he's confused, he's been manipulated by her. His finger found me, she's after the money, this is exactly what the guardianship was for. 60 people had just watched my father cross a room like a colonel inspecting a parade ground, and here was Trent insisting the man was lost. The room went quiet the way an audience goes quiet when it stops being an audience and starts being a jury. Renee lunged for sympathy, then spun on Walt. You lied to me, you called me. And there it was in her own voice. She'd been told her father was dead and never once asked to see him. Never called the funeral home. Just booked herself a podium. Grief that skips the body and lands on paperwork tells its own story. I walked up the aisle and folded her against me. You were told he collapsed. You called me at 6:30 about the will. You never once asked to see him. Behind me, the pastor from Ruth's old church stood, took his coat and moved 3 rows from the Hargrove pew. The room was choosing. Diane stood, buttoned her jacket. Mr. Hargrove, may I see that document? What followed took 11 minutes, and I've never enjoyed paperwork more. Revocation of every power of attorney filed with the county. Clinic records, sedated 9 to 11:30 that January morning, while a notary stamp claimed the POA was signed 10-15, 20 miles away. A man cannot be sedated in one town and signing in another. Bank records, 189,000 moved in 5 months, 91,000 to TH Ventures LLC. The T is for Trent. The H, I assume, does not stand for honest. A Helix signed April 9th, when Mr. Callahan was 110 miles away at Pinebrook. Then the will, dated April 20th, no visitors logged that week. So who witnessed this, Mr. Hargrove? One witness was a loan officer from Trent's own office, sitting in the 4th row with a casserole on his knee. He went the color of dishwater. You told me it was routine, Trent. A witness to the forgery, unwitnessing himself live in front of the whole county. Trent tried one last stand. Nobody consented to being recorded. You set me up, and Diane, mild as ever. No one recorded anything. You read it into a microphone at a funeral you scheduled speaking time for. The hall doors opened, and 2 deputies stepped in, exactly on the schedule Diane had arranged with the fraud unit days earlier. Nobody got tackled in front of the lilies. Real life is quieter than that, and quieter is worse. Mr. Hargrove, we'd like you to come answer some questions about a bank fraud report. Federal. Every mask in his drawer failed in 10 seconds. Outrage, charm, nothing working, then the beggar's mask, last of all. Frank, I'm family. I was going to pay it back, every cent. It was an investment. Diane later learned what that investment really was. A standing poker game 2 counties over, chasing losses since Christmas. Sal had already dug that up himself, for the satisfaction of it. My father looked at Trent the way he used to look at a warped board somebody swore was straight. You had my checkbook 7 months, son. The only thing you ever grew was my funeral. The hall didn't laugh. It exhaled, 60 people, one breath, a whole town closing a ledger. Then Renee broke, and I have to tell this part straight because she's still my sister. We were drowning, Daddy, barely a voice at all. The lake house, the cards, all of it. Trent said it was temporary. And I believed her. Probably did start as temporary the way a leak starts as a drip. But she proved why nobody stays sympathetic long on that side of the room, wheeling on me wet-faced. But you made it worse, Casey. If you'd stayed out of it, nobody ever had to know. Not, I'm sorry. Just, we'd have gotten away with it. I looked at my big sister, who called me at 6:30 to tell me I was nothing, and gave her the calmest sentence in this whole story. You called before sunrise to tell me I get nothing, Renee. I'm the only one leaving this room with everything I walked in with. The deputies moved. Trent went up the aisle between them, still explaining interest rates to men wearing badges. Renee walked to the second car under her own power, just questions that afternoon, her new shoes catching in the gravel, that expensive click gone stumbling. Something about that sound is filed in my memory forever under the word consequences. The car door she stopped and turned, and for the first time that day my sister actually looked at our father instead of what he owned. Dad walked over, unhurried, and said the thing he'd said into a muted phone Friday morning with the steam still coming off his coffee. You buried the wrong man, sweetheart. What he'd saved 2 whole days to deliver in person. Renee's mouth opened. Nothing came out. The deputy closed the door with that soft, terminal click. That, friends, is how my father attended his own funeral, cleared his own name, and still made it home in time for the evening news, which for once had nothing on him. We unlocked Willow Creek that same evening with a locksmith of our own choosing, invoice and receipt, because in this family we keep records now. Dad walked past everything Trent's crew had pawed through and went straight to the mantel, winding Mom's brass clock before he'd even taken off the suit. Tick came back. The house started breathing again. So I think did he? Here's the ledger. Trent was charged with 2 counts of forgery, theft from an elderly person, and falsifying a loan application. His license was suspended within the month, revoked by fall. TH Ventures LLC was dissolved by the receiver. Between restitution and clawback, Dad recovered 138 of the 189,000 taken. The Helic died frozen. The house was never touched. Diane moved everything into a living trust Trent couldn't have picked with a law degree, which he also doesn't have. Renee took a plea. 3 years probation, restitution on a schedule, and community service the judge assigned her at a nursing home, reading to residents whose families don't visit anymore. People ask if I've forgiven my sister. 8 weeks later, through the glass at the probation office, she asked flat, "Did you come to gloat?" I said no and meant it and slid across a copy of Mom's letter. At the bottom, Dad had added one line in pencil. "Your mama said don't go quiet. That part was for you too." Renee read it twice. Something moved in her face I hadn't seen since before Trent. What I told her was a boundary, not a bridge. When the restitution's paid and the counseling's real, you know where I live. Until then, you get exactly what you offered me at 6:30 that morning. She nodded. First honest transaction we'd had in years. Dad's back at the VFW every Thursday. He and Walt started a monthly talk at the Post called Papers While You're Breathing, teaching folks how to read a power of attorney and spot a signature that's too pretty. 11 people showed up the first month. By the third, they were pulling out extra chairs. I took a staff job at a hospital in Louisville. No more 13-week states. Every Sunday I make the 2-hour drive and Dad burns the bacon on purpose because he claims I like it that way. Presence isn't a debt you pay off. It's a habit you keep. Mom's brass clock ticks on the mantel, and in his wallet, where that torn envelope used to live, my dad now keeps one pressed lily. "Best funeral I never had," he says. My father taught me the measure of a man was never the number in his account. It's whether his say still stands while he's breathing, and whether the people who love him would rather guard his signature than inherit it. That's my story. One phone call at 6:30 in the morning, one forged signature, and one old soldier who attended his own funeral standing up. If this reminded you to check your parents' paperwork or your own, take it as your sign and do it this week while everybody's still above ground. If you've lived through family greed of your own, tell me your story in the comments. I read every one. And if you want more true stories about family, betrayal, and quiet justice, hit subscribe, ring the bell, and share this with somebody who needs it. This has been Silent Revenge. Until next time, protect your say.